you guys live in the neighborhood? Do you live in this neighborhood?
Yeah, 5 minutes away, Shepherd Park.
Oh, Shepherd Park, yeah.
So it's real easy. Very happy about that. Particularly days like today, traveling.
Donna's telling us something here. Oh, we're live, she said.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're gathered today because many of us believe something important and unsettling is happening in Black America. We believe that Black America is in serious trouble, and pretending otherwise has consequences, especially for our children. Opportunities have expanded in meaningful ways, representation has increased, legal barriers have fallen, and yet too many Black children are falling behind academically, socially, and spiritually. Families are under strain, institutions are weaker, a growing number of young people are entering adulthood without preparation or discipline needed to thrive. That tension is uncomfortable, but refusing to name it does not make it disappear. It only simply transfers the cost to the next generation. And that's why we're so blessed to have Juan Williams with us, our beloved Trinitarian, who wrote this almost prophetic book, Enough, almost 20 years ago. Enough enters this space with clarity and seriousness. It challenges the idea that compassion requires silence or that acknowledging agency undermines justice. This afternoon's conversation is not about blame, it's about responsibility, personal, communal, and moral. As a church, we believe that truth-telling is an act of care, and that hope must be grounded in reality if it is meant to be anything at all. So I wanted to thank Juan for writing this prophetic book, and now that we're talking about it 20 years later, and its relevance, but also thank him for being here. I also want to welcome my co-moderator, Richard Wilson, who will be joining me in conversation with Juan. So we'll just jump right into it. At its core, is enough a diagnosis of a crisis? And if so, what kind of crisis are we actually facing?
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming out on this snowy day. And Jordan, your trip from Baltimore was quite an adventure, so thank you. Richard, thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to this church for, in your words, Jordan, being a church where telling the truth is not going to offend anybody, not intended to offend anybody, but intended to inspire us as a body, the body of Christ. And I say that as we're seated here. And of course, thanks to Reverend Shayna, I see you're doing some babysitting. Thank you very much. You know, when there's a fire, it's time to ring the bell. And Bill Cosby rang the bell in 2004. He rang the bell, and then he was sidelined by scandal that so many of you must be familiar with because he's so famous. But I wanted to pick up the hammer and keep ringing the bell because I think the fact that the fireman in that case was somewhat sidelined didn't mean that the fire had been put out. And in fact, I think the fire continues to burn to this moment in just the terms that you had described, Jordan, that when you look at young Black America, there's a lot of reason for concern. And so often, when people say to you, there's reason for concern, they interpret this as you're blaming the victim.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You say, oh, you shouldn't be critical. You're blaming the victim. Sitting here in this church, my church, our church, I just want to remind people of the notion in the Christian theology that God helps those who help themselves.
Amen.
And at the very start of this book, I quote from Samuel. And Samuel says that he will forever judge people who can see that their sons are doing vile things and yet fail to restrain them. Mm-hmm. And that is the theory. You can see what's going on, and yet you fail to act for fear that you are going to offend or be accused of somehow ignoring systemic racism, structural racism, the odds that face us as a black people in America. And to the contrary, what I am making the argument is, oh, hold on. I remember, not remember, but I am aware, having read about Middle Passage, I am aware and have read about the horrors of slavery. I am aware and have read about Reconstruction, legal segregation. I have heard about Harriet Tubman. I have heard about, people from Frederick Douglass to W.E.B. Du Bois, to Marcus Garvey, to Dr. King, to Thurgood Marshall. These are people who, through darkest times, believed in acting and using what strength they had to rise up and speak out and achieve a better day for the next generation. To me, that is the judgment. That is how we will be judged in our generation. And that is why I felt the need to write and say, I just can't believe a lot of the things that are going on and that are not being attended to. The book opens up with a scene from Boondocks, which is no longer around, but it was a comic strip.
Yep.
And a comic strip by a black cartoonist. And in it, Dr. King is in the pulpit, and he's looking out, and he's saying, wait a minute, holy smokes, look at what I'm seeing in front of me. I'm seeing a bunch of gangbangers and people who want to dress like they just got out of jail, like the jailer took their belt so their pants are falling down. They're not speaking English in any way that would allow you to succeed in a profession, to fly a plane or to lead a congregation. And these are people calling each other the N-word, demeaning their own women as, all kinds of language. And he said, so this is what I took all those ass kickings for? That's why I was out there facing the racist? And he says, this is madness. Right. What is going on? So that's the thesis of this book. And I must again give credit to Bill Cosby, because Bill Cosby's far larger a voice in American life than even a book can be, because he's a celebrity. Yeah. And on the 50th anniversary of Brown, the Brown decision, here was Bill Cosby in Washington at Constitution Hall saying, this is wrong, and calling out the leaders of civil rights groups, political actors, activists, and saying, what are you doing? Why aren't you talking about what's going on? You talk about dirty laundry. I'm talking about putting our black people's dirty laundry in the street. He said, your dirty laundry gets out of school at 3 o'clock, walking down the street, smoking a joint, cursing at each other, and then you want to say, I'm the problem.
Yeah. Well, when you focus on Bill Cosby, that is an excellent person, and it's ironic as well, because prior to the so-called scandal that he had to encounter, he was America's dad to a whole generation, and everyone respected him for that. And that's for one generation, but for another generation, he was the perfect husband, for an older generation, how to show love to your spouse, to your children. And the whole family was a family of no self-hate. It was a model for us to move forward. So it's so ironic that when they called, as you mentioned in your book, for him to speak at the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, they was expecting, I would imagine, some other message from
Bill Cosby, right.
But they received something different.
Without a doubt, I think that you're onto something, Richard, because, it's like you invite a comedian, you expect comedy. And maybe you expect that there will be some, soft touches of humor intended to be self-mocking, self-deprecating, but you don't expect that you are going to get straight talk and even harsh talk and say, we have to deal with reality. And that's what they got. Now, if you looked at the book, you know that the immediate reaction was a standing ovation for Bill Cosby. And it didn't get a whole lot of news coverage until later. And later the argument came, well, who's Bill Cosby, the comic, to be engaged in such strong social commentary about Black America? Now, I must tell you, I think they had to hold up a little bit in terms of their criticism of Cosby because, to Richard's point, Bill Cosby was much loved across the generations in Black America. I think even in white America.
White America as well.
It was the #1 TV show for much of the 80s, The Cosby Show. And then afterwards was the show about Black colleges and universities.
A different world.
A different world.
Absolutely.
So people had a certain respect. So he had, if you will, some social capital.
Right.
And it was going to be at somebody's expense to then try to take him down. So there was a restraint, if you will. But Cosby didn't even use the restraint of others to say, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Sorry if I stepped on anybody's toes. To the contrary, he doubled down.
Yes.
He kept going. And when people, I remember some of my colleagues as writers and journalists said, that's like, imagine if you gave your crazy uncle a megaphone and put him on the corner, and he's out there cursing people and telling those kids, get off his lawn and all that. People viewed it, you heard that kind of criticism as well. So, he's blaming the victim.
Yes.
He's not understanding the struggles of being a young Black person in America today. He's not understanding the difficulties faced as a result of family breakdown, bad schools. And so he is blaming the victim. Cosby said he's not blaming the victim.
Right.
He is trying to tell the victim how to get out of the hole and saying, move it, let's get going. Because to the contrary, and I think this is the more difficult part for people to hear, the culture is such a burden. Kelvin's here, and I think of the music. When I hear his music, I feel inspired.
Yeah.
I want to come to church. I want to go out and serve the Lord. But you listen, and it's the #1 music in America today is hip-hop. And you listen, and this music, to me, is toxic, especially if you are a young Black person, and I would emphasize male person,
Agreed.
seeking a sense of self. Who am I in this world? How do I appear strong and capable? How do I appear attractive, not only to women, but to my peers, to other men? And what is the message? The message that comes from this music is, I should be hyper-violent, hypersexual. I should treat people who read and discuss things, lawyers.
Yep.
I should treat them as, oh my God, the two of you are acting white.
Absolutely. That's my life story. I heard it all the
Oh,
time.
sorry.
Yes.
You're not authentically Black
Right.
because you read books and you have discussions about issues and you believe, this is a struggle to say, but you believe in family.
Right.
You believe in respecting each other that way.
Right.
So can you imagine, that is viewed as not authentic.
Right.
And this extends, I'll stop on this point, that this music, #1 in America, hip-hop to this day, is #1 for a reason. It's #1 because white America loves it.
It sells.
It sells hugely. And it sells hugely. The #1 demographic for this music is young white males
Yep.
who like to have the ability to use the N-word, talk about women as bees and all that, and engage in the kind of fantasy that says, to be Black is to have loose morals, to get high, be, intoxicated and loose living all the time. That's Black people. And that stereotype is then furthered by this music. In fact, it's so embraced, as I said, it's the #1 genre in the country. Now, this is not to speak against the music, because music is music, fine. But I just want to mention to you that people from, you know, the musical greats, if you will,
Sure.
have spoken out and said, hey, you know, rap musicians, you guys are making what they call big bank, but you are selling out.
Yeah. Yeah. You're selling your people up the
You
road.
are.
You are.
But if you say that, you said you know risk. I know risk.
Oh,
Believe
yes. We know. So I want to slow us down just a little bit to go back to Cosby. So when Cosby spoke at this 50th anniversary, and rightfully what he said was true, how do you balance people like Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, who used that opportunity to I think, grandstand and condemn Cosby, someone who was beloved, would probably condemn you based on this book, where you're speaking truth to power, but yet so often those people are seen as the moral voice for Black America in today's world. I mean, I remember being at Howard and they would bring him, and how he would treat Howard students and how he would talk to us in this Black scent and vernacular was so different than how he taught his Georgetown sociology classes. So I'm curious how these thought leaders who claim that they love Black America could stand in the wake of something like Cosby and something like Enough and talk against it. I want to know, like, have you thought about the psychology there?
Well, I think that, again, there's a market to speak against Cosby. It's telling people they don't have to make an effort, and telling people that the stereotype is, to return to this concept, authentic. That if you're really Black, that's how you talk, that's how you dress, that's how you feel about women as a male. Or as a female, that's how you dress to signify that you are with it, you're down with this Black culture. And to my mind, when you start calling out people in this way, you'd have to say, you're not serving the larger society, you're serving yourself. And I don't doubt that he, therefore, was getting opportunities to speak at Howard and to go around the country from people who said, oh, he's not controversial. In fact, he is affirming Blackness, and we want to hear him, and we want to see him, or other people like that. And if you are speaking and challenging it and controversial, then they'll say, well, you know, that message is going to offend some people. And you have some white people in the audience who may take it the wrong way and say it's justification for their stereotypical views of Black people. So rather than embrace a challenging message, and to my mind, not just challenging, but a message of uplift, right? A message that is in keeping with Black history and the whole idea of struggle to progress and to ascend above difficulties and darkness, to make a way out of no way. To me, you know, that's a biblical, you know, there's that language in the Bible, but especially in terms of Black American religion, religious theory, making a way out of no way is very real.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not offended by it. I view it as, again, in keeping with the titans of Black American history.
Yeah, well, in terms of Black American history, Frederick Douglass, he spoke in a certain way, but he had controversy. You know, we don't know about it as much because it's 100 years later.
Right.
But the dean of the Howard Law School, Langston, he challenged. Same thing with Booker T. Washington, Du Bois, they challenged each other. Marcus Garvey, moving on further to Malcolm X and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. They all had people challenge them. But were these academic type of challenges, or what differences? Were they speaking the same messages as you see it?
So no, I think that, you know, this is so important because a lot of this history gets kind of pureed, and people then don't appreciate the depth and the quality of the challenge. It brings to mind, listening to you, Richard, the discussion of difference between, let's say, W.E.B. Du Bois and a Booker T. Washington. And people would say, oh, I know that. You know, the quick handle is that Booker T. Washington was all about compromise with the white society and with racism and segregation, and said basically we can be like the fingers on a hand. We work together when necessary, but we are separate.
Right.
And in that regard, he was creating black schools, black businesses, raising money, black capital, to facilitate the growth of a black economic base for black America. And then people say, well, yeah, okay, that's him. I see him as more conservative and Republican, if you will, in the current context.
Agreed.
And then there's W.E.B. Du Bois, who's saying, oh no, we have a talented 10th, we have smart, capable people, and they need to lead, and we do not need to foster a belief in segregation. We have to push for integration and for equal opportunity and challenge those who would impose on us because of our color of our skin. We are Americans and we deserve equal justice and equal opportunity. And people say, oh, well, those are two separate worlds. They were in contest. They were in competition. I say, wait a second. Let's listen to what they say about each other. And what you find is they both agree that we need to build the economic base of black America. Right. They both believe that we need better schools for black America. They both believe that the family and family structure is critical for black America. And yet that part of the conversation somehow evaporates. Instead, people focus on, well, I know this is the left and this is the right. No, I think you have to understand that people are struggling to find a way to rise up. And as they have different ideas, they have contests of ideas, but that is legitimate. When you refuse to challenge, when you see wrong, to me, that's illegitimate. That is abdicating responsibility, and it's, to me, moral drift, that you would see wrong in front of you and never call it out. And in fact, say that you and I have to make excuses, and if we don't make excuses, we're not really black.
Exactly. Very powerful. Right, we aren't really black, and as I've shared with you countless times, that's my growing up.
Wait, don't keep going. What do you mean? Tell us what you mean.
So as a young black boy in South Florida, growing up in private Episcopal schools, my family pushed education as an avenue for success. And I don't think that's any secret that in America, education leads to better outcomes. Unfortunately, though, there was still that segregation in Florida where I may go to school with whites, but then when I go home or I go to my grandmother's house, I'm still in the black neighborhood that they were segregated to in the 30s and 40s. And my peers, people who I loved, friends that I see their faces today, would have these quips, oh, he's white, or he thinks he's white, or he's soft, because I didn't want to be a football player or a basketball player, but because I wanted to be a doctor and ultimately an attorney. And so that always drove me crazy, and as we've had our private conversations, I've always had an issue with, as a Caribbean American, with black Americans for that view, because in the Caribbean, and I'm looking at some of my Caribbean folks here, we push education in the strongest sense of the word. And that was what black America used to do. So what shifted in the last 50 years has always been very concerning to me. But as a personal anecdote, that is my story. But when I talk to my friends, black, Caribbean, but just black men as the world see us, we all have that same story. It's the same thread. You think you're white, you're soft, are you gay? Just because you are not hardened by life, because you dare to dream that there's an opportunity waiting beyond your four corners of your neighborhood.
Let me just say, hardened, I think, to become what Richard does as a lawyer, or you do as a lawyer, you better be tough. You better know how to deal with challenges, failure. I remember John Thompson, the coach at Georgetown, once telling me, he says, people think he's such a success. He said, you have to know how to fail in order to succeed.
That's right.
And he said to me, every time people talk about success, he talked about the 9 out of 10 times that he didn't succeed.
That's right.
Yeah. But what it did was he used it as fire. So my dad was a boxing coach, and he used to say to guys in the corner, look, you can use fire, or fire can use you.
That's right.
And you can fire coming from that guy is going to burn down your house, or you can use it to fire up your furnace and get your ass in gear and get going.
That's right.
And that's what we're talking about, using that fire to get going.
Right. To make it the wind beneath your wings. One thing that concerns me deeply, since we're talking about where we made that shift, every day that I leave my house, there is a portrait of Black Wall Street that my wife bought me when we were in college. And no matter where we live, it hangs. Because it's a reminder of what Black people were capable of doing in this country. And that was not even 50 years post-slavery. Then we look at Jim Crow and we see all that success that came post-Jim Crow. And then dealing with Brown v. Board, anyone who went to law school, the truth is that the theory was not necessarily we wanted equal access, we wanted equal funding.
Correct.
And then the powers that be used that, and they gave us equal access. And some would say that integration actually destroyed Black America, that it's not rap that truly started the demise of Black America, but it was at the point when we entered into an integrated society where we had to start relying on each other as a community to uplift each other. So I'm curious, with that context in mind, where do you land on that?
So my sense is that there's several institutions that clearly were weakened by integration. I don't think there's any question about it. I'm a baseball fan, and
yes,
if you look back, the Negro Leagues were an institution with tremendous talent, but they had that talent cornered, if you will, because of segregation, right, and that Black athletes could not compete in Major League Baseball until 47 and Jackie Robinson. Yeah. But once you see that integration comes to Major League Baseball, you see the demise of the Negro Leagues. So it's not just the Black athletes who are impacted, but also Black ownership, Black fans, and all that attends in terms of economic activity to that world of Black baseball. So that's an example where you'd say things are diminished. But the reality, to my mind, is that there was a wide door open. I think there's a reason that Black fans flock to see Jackie Robinson. I think there's a reason that you see the growth in terms of Black economic opportunity in the world of sports subsequent to that. You look at, I believe the NFL is almost 80% Black. And that's the biggest, sport in the world in terms of money. That's a hell of a thing to say in terms of opportunity and wealth. I don't see Black ownership in the way that I did with Black baseball, but again, it's a starting point, and you have to view it not as an end point, but for the opportunity, the wealth, and the prospective growth that could exist given the fact that you now have more money flowing into those pockets, more opportunity. Just this week, you think about arguably the most famous Black athlete living today, Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So just this past week, Michael Jordan now is the owner of a NASCAR outfit.
Yeah.
I don't follow this, I have no interest in it, but he challenged the ownership of NASCAR, and they settled with Michael Jordan. So now you have a different structure, and Michael Jordan is an owner in that world. So there would have been no opportunity in the old segregated world for Michael Jordan to become Michael Jordan across basketball to make all the money, to become the ad guy, to be with Spike Lee in the ad, and to be like Mike, and it must be the shoes and all that. Well, look at where he is now. You have to have some level of vision and potential and say, oh, this can happen. I think of my grandson. He was in church today. Such a rare occurrence. But my grandson is a big fan of Steph Curry. And for good reason. What a tremendous athlete.
Yeah.
Okay, Steph Curry has used some of his money at your alma mater, at Howard University. And what has he used it for? Golf.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, this is vision. I would never have thought of this. But he thinks we need more investment in producing black golfers. Oh, I think this is real. I think this, again, I offer these as examples of how you can get out of the sense of loss and start looking to the sense of gain and opportunity and uplift.
And there has been significant gain since Brown.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, well, 73% around Brown's time was we had families.
Yes.
Mother, father, children, and same families. And during that time, we've had a growth in the middle class, significant. In other words,
huge.
When people talk about black people, they may think about only one economic class, but it has been a substantial growth of blacks in the middle class, middle income, I should call it, in that period of time. So even though we had that growth in that time, something else has gone wrong. And now, 73% families in Brown's time, 70 years later, we're down 1/3?
Right, 1/3.
Is that, how significant is that in terms of where we are? Again, we have growth in our middle class, our middle income. Someone's being left behind.
There's no question, Richard. It's tragic because, as you point out, some doors have opened, but the question is who was prepared to go through those doors and have the people that went through the doors reached back to pull up your sister or your brother to come with you.
Yeah.
Now, if you speak of people as victims, then you can write them off. Say, well, you're victimized by the structural systemic issues. But what if, and then you start to say, oh, you know what? Here's what we're going to petition for in the name of black people. Increased social services, welfare programs. And so many people have argued that, in fact, in the late 60s is when you start to see the deterioration, the diminution of family structure tied to the welfare requirements that you can't have a man in the house and all this kind of thing. And you start to see the acceptance of that kind of behavior. Cosby made fun of it. He said, you know, a woman with 6 kids, 4 or 5 different men in her life, no fathers, right?
Yeah.
And then people say, well, that's the life. You're just living the life. That's acceptable.
It is. That's where we are.
As opposed to saying, oh no, if you're a guy and you get a woman pregnant,
You marry her.
you not only have to support that woman and that child, but you should be, in fact, you should now be married to that woman.
Absolutely.
And that there was a time in black American history when you were shamed if you did not hold to that kind of standard.
That's right.
That went away in a big way.
Yeah.
So I think when people talk about, well, don't shame people, don't judge people, who are you? You know, are you the black middle class now, and because you've made it, you think that you're better than me? What if I said, no, I think I want you to be like me. I want you to be better than me.
Absolutely.
And I think we can work together to make our community a better place. Last week when you were speaking about our church, and you talked about people who for a time thought, well, I don't know what's going to happen there. It looks like just a stump is left of what was previously in place.
He was listening to the sermon.
But there were roots.
Yes.
And if you didn't know of the roots, you would not recognize Trinity December 2025 with our great new minister.
That's right.
And with a thriving congregation. And you wouldn't believe that those people had faith not only in Jesus, but in themselves and in this place.
Yes.
That this is a place that can give you more than you ever give it.
That's right.
And that's the case with family, that's the case with partnership, that's the case with understanding why when people tell you to save a dime, invest a dime, it pays off.
Yeah, in the long run it does. It does. In your book, Juan, you talked about how the black middle class, and this is going off of Richard, how we have made gains, how the black middle class, a lot of them have failed their children. You talk about lawyers, doctors whose children don't have that same hunger, that same drive, that same eagerness to succeed, and rather they are looking at rap and hip hop and football and sports as an avenue. Do you think that because they have been somewhat have a silver spoon in their mouth, one would argue that they've lost that fire within? As someone who is, upward mobility bound, I'm deeply concerned about the future of my child. So I ask this question as a father, but also as someone who's deeply concerned about my son's generation.
So I have the experience where in talking to young people, they say, I want to be rich. I say, that's great. I hope you do become rich. That's fine. But they don't seem to see the ladder or the path. And earlier I talked about for the two of you that you have to know how to struggle in your profession. Mm-hmm. And before that, you had to struggle in school and in your personal life to take advantage, to capitalize on the opportunity just to be there, mm-hmm. so that you could start to grow in the profession.
Absolutely.
To me, you have to have that sense of desire, ambition. And so when a young person says to me, I want to be rich, I'm going to be rich, I say, fine, but do you understand the sacrifices that are necessary? That even if you think of great athletes or great comedians, great writers, do you know how much work goes into producing that product that then elevates you and elevates your income? Right. I think a lot of people don't see it. And again, the popular culture doesn't deliver this message. I am shocked when I hear people tell me they watch Real Housewives.
Oh, God. And they do, faithfully.
Faithfully.
And it's a disgrace to our community.
Okay.
I'll just tell you that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, you see people.
You see the crowd, right?
But there's just some loss of responsibility.
Yes.
I was listening to Kojo Nambe the other day. Mm-hmm. He was interviewing our Mayor Bowser, and they had a great interview. And the last thing he asked them is like, did you really fail us, basically, mm-hmm. in your school systems?
Yes.
Because of the school system, these kids are not really. But she, challenged that. She said, no, we have growth rates in education, things of that nature. But the major things he said, I'm not the parent of these kids. A lot of these kids, 70, sometimes not that much, but truancy. Sure. They're just not going to school. They're not getting the education, and education seems to have been the key that uplift us out of slavery, Absolutely. Uplift us out of Jim Crow, uplift us, and it's still uplifting us now, but where can we get the message that truancy, you got to go to school, you got to get that education, is the significant thing to uplift?
So recently, I live in this neighborhood, and recently there was a rash, not recently, I'm going back several years, but in the last 5 years, let's say, mm-hmm. a rash of these carjackings. And the carjackings then, as I read about them, were linked directly to young black males. And when I say young, I'm talking about people oftentimes like preteens to early teens.
12, 13, 14, yeah.
Yes. And there was a tragic situation where a man saw some boys in the middle of the night trying to carjack his car and shot and killed one of these kids, and then he ended up in jail. But I mention this because, guess what? What Richard was talking about in terms of truancy rates attaches directly to the people involved in these carjackings. And the truancy rate for DC public schools has been about 50%. That's unbelievable.
Yes, unbelievable.
How can that be? You mean 50% of the kids aren't going to school? Well, what's going on? How can, you say, well, is it family structure? Maybe there's no father, but the mother is busy, she's got a job or two, but for some reason the child's not in school. So this comes back to ambition and drive and communicating. How do you communicate to that young person? Your future is not that you're going to be a social media influencer. You're not going to be the Real Housewife. Somebody marries and you hang around Potomac all day in your nightgown. Right?
Drinking wine, right.
Right. That in fact, you have to want to get in there and excel.
Right.
And you want to compete.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with competing.
Right.
And to say this to me is so essential. So when you talk, Richard, about truancy, I think you're coming on to what you might call a brass tack. How is it, now Kojo said to her, did you fail us with regard to the schools? She says, what about the families, the parents? And I would say, that's exactly right. Why are we not saying to these kids, not going to school is signing your own death certificate?
It is.
You're killing yourself. You are hurting yourself, you're hurting your neighbors, you're hurting our community. But you got to understand what's in it for you and how you can succeed. And again, this is where I would hold a lot of our politicians and civil rights activists to account.
Yes.
I think a lot of us talk in broad terms about social movement, about civil rights history, and maybe we neglect to say, oh, we have an idea about how you can be a success, young woman, young man. We really do. You should stay in school. Don't be a truant. Stay in school. Even if it's a bad school, stay in school. Flower where you're planted. Be the best in that school.
That's right.
Number 2, graduate from that school. And guess what? Build a reputation among the adults in your life so that they would be references and you might move on and then go to college. And even if it's a community college, go to that college and again, excel. And then graduate from that college. And if you can get further education, take the opportunity. And then don't get married until you establish yourself in some professional level.
Absolutely.
Have some income. And don't have children before you're married. And as you start to move forward in life, understand that saving money, investing money, buying a house are the elements of capitalistic success. And if you do these things, young man, black
Yes.
black woman,
Yes.
do you know that the percentages of people who've done these things and end up in poverty is almost non-existent? Oh, I know how you can be a success. Why aren't we delivering this message with some energy and passion and love to our young people? Instead, you hear all this victim talk, and I just think it is crippling to say to someone, if you act the fool, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Instead, say, you know what? I know it's tempting to throw up the middle finger to people who treat you badly, stereotype you, demean you, but you have got to see the bigger fight.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to knock them out, you got to be stronger.
Right. Right, absolutely. It's very clear in our talking in the book that culture matters, and that our culture norms have been broken. I was looking at a New York Times article recently. In 2025, there was a report that came out about Howard University, my alma mater, and some of your alma maters, that said 19% of the people enrolled are black men. So hear this, only 19% of black men are enrolled at Howard University, or if I'm saying that wrong, you get what I'm saying. That is concerning for an institution that is the preeminent black institution in the world. The leading producers of doctors, engineers, attorneys, financiers. We have I recognize that we're talking today about black America as a whole, but wouldn't it be true to say we don't just have an issue in black America, we have a black male issue. And I think we have a male issue throughout our country, as so many people are flagging. But Governor Westmore in Maryland has been on this talk spree about boys. But more importantly, I think we as the church, we as black men, need to talk about black boys. And so I'm curious, how can we as a community, as church leaders, as business leaders, how do you think we can actually make an impact in these young black boys' lives? Because it almost seems that the problem has become so uncontained, Pandora's box has been opened, and it's really bothering me.
It bothers me deeply.
Yeah.
You know, and it bothers me deeply with good reason, because I think the culture suggests to young black men that it is simply a rite of passage for you to end up in jail. Oh, and what is the consequence of all these images, less so now with the music videos than with the music, but what is the image of celebrating criminal action, behavior, violence, holding a gun, shooting a gun, beating somebody? What is the consequence of this? Right now, I'm forgetting the numbers exactly, so forgive me, but it's something like, you know, almost half of all young black men between certain ages, under 30, I think, are going to end up in jail at some point in their life. And that the message that's being delivered is to be really black, to be a strong black man, yeah, you have to at some point have been in jail. That would say to me, you have street cred. You are a black man. So you're walking around, as I said, your pants hanging down because you don't have the belt. You know, you got the do-rag on your head because you can't, you know, there's so much in terms of that culture, the fashion that comes from this image. And it keeps going then, of course, in terms of the reflection from your peers. Who gets respect, who is seen as strong and capable, is not someone who's educated, but someone who engages in violence, trash talk, all the rest. To me, this is, you know, in terms, I'm trying to think of language that's appropriate here, but it is a huge loss. It is a crisis. It is a moment of deep, deep regret to see what's going on with young black men early in the 21st century. I want to just open up a little bit to understand that people might say, well, you're competing in terms of black America or you're competing against white America, and isn't it sad? But you know what? We're competing against the world.
That's right.
We're competing in an age of AI and computers and people coming from around the world who are seeking opportunity. America is the world's leading economy, and they see opportunity in America where other people are saying, oh, well, I was born in America and I'm a victim of it. No, they come here and they're seeing opportunity.
Absolutely.
And yet that message is not being delivered. And you got to stop and think, what's going on? Now, Bill Cosby said the reason that young black men are not getting this message is that we have a lot of politicians whose job it is to mismanage poor black people.
Yes.
And you keep them if you will, in their position of poverty and need, and sell them, oh, it's the white man that's not doing enough for you, and you need more welfare or social support, as opposed to saying, hey, wait a second, you are the strong one, and I believe in you, and I know how you can be a success and how you can build so that, much in the line of Christian theology, you are building a legacy that goes beyond you and your life.
Yes.
That you rise up in future generations and people call your name.
Yes.
Because you have built something beyond flesh and blood.
That's right.
Well, in that regard, like self-determination, each person needs to take responsibility. But from your subtitle of your book, it doesn't appear that so-called messaging people, our so-called leaders, are telling us exactly what needs to be done in order for us to move forward. And I recall reading your book, near the end of your book, you said, well, here we have these so-called leaders taking their cut out of these affirmative action programs, out of these poverty programs. It's a whole mindset because if our leaders are taking a cut, maybe everybody's trying to get a cut.
Yes.
Constantly going down. Instead of doing it themselves, they're looking at government to get their cut. Now, I understand we all pay our taxes, so we want to have those resources come to us. But do we just do things just to get our cut, or do we do things to really increase ourselves?
So that's I'm with you. That's the question.
Right.
Do we do things because you say that, I think it was Jesse Jackson said, that's the way we survive. So what does that mean? Jackson's very ill, potentially near death. Yeah. So I speak with reverence, because I think he's a historic figure in Black America. But you look back and you say, okay, so at the end of the '88 convention, Jackson had launched what then was the most successful effort by a Black person to gain the Democratic Party nomination for president. And on the cover of Time magazine, it said, what does Jesse want? Okay. The answer came back. Jesse wants his own plane for the general election campaign. He wants to be paid by the candidate, by the party. He wants staff there. In addition to which, of course, he was engaged in business with private corporations that didn't want a Jesse Jackson protest, and his sons end up with a beer distributorship with Budweiser, I think in Chicago for that jurisdiction. So that's what Jesse wanted. And Jesse Jackson is arguably, in my generation, maybe the biggest known Black leader. And then, of course, you come to Obama, but stopping in terms of people who were tied into that civil rights activism phrase, that's there. But what if the agenda had been, you know what I want? I want better schools for Black kids in this country. And I want to deal with the teachers' unions, the local governments in terms of how they're funded. We were discussing earlier about coming out of Brown, that really the argument in Brown was, we want equal funding for Black schools, and if you won't give it to us, how about then we have integration, and then you don't have a choice. You're gonna have to fund all these schools if they're integrated. Well, we know the reality is integration didn't come, but the funding then has gone in such a way that it has not supported the elevation in terms of the quality of schools in the Black community. To the contrary, you could say it has elevated some of the administrators and unions and the like, but it hasn't elevated the outcomes of achievement for those children. Instead, we have a celebrated achievement gap. Yeah. So what if the agenda had been, well, I think we need to invest as a people, as an American people, regardless of color, in economic opportunity for that younger generation? What if we had set as an agenda item, oh, we can create opportunities in some of the O-line industries for young Black entrepreneurs? I can keep going, but to your point, Richard, if it's just about that's how we survive, well, then everybody thinks, oh, you know what, I'll take my cut here, I'll take my cut there, you know what, I'm going to sing songs with the N-word in it, it'll sell, right? I'm going to make pornography. Snoop Dogg is, you know, he's so fun. Snoop Dogg's one of the major pornographers in the country. And people say, oh, but that's Snoop Dogg. And I think, why doesn't anyone look, am I just jaded or what's going on here?
You have to ask the real question, do they care about their people? And the answer to me is no. They care about money and capital.
Well, I care about money and capital, but I'm saying you have to do it in such a way that it's not about exploiting people.
Right.
And here's the thing, they're exploiting other black people.
Yes.
And then they're saying they're the authentic black people.
Right. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So, do you find that it's possible for a leader to rise up? We look at coming in, you brought up President Obama, we look at 2008 and how we had so much hope as black Americans that maybe we are now in a post-racial society. And then, of course, we see the Trump backlash. And then we see President Biden, who ushers in a new wave of diversity, probably one of the most impressive presidents and most presidents who have actually got things done for African Americans since the Great Society, since
Absolutely.
Lyndon Johnson. And then, of course, we saw the pendulum swing again in 2024 with our current president. Do you think that there is room in today's age and society for a leader, a black leader particularly, to bring the black collective together to argue for the things that you just raised? Better schools for our children, economic opportunities, investment in our communities in a real serious way that can uplift black America.
So I think that there is lots of opportunity. Richard was talking before about, you know, if you stop and look at it, not just in the United States, but globally, you'd say this is the wealthiest black population, not only in the world, but for all time, in one place, in the United States. And if you stopped and looked at the number of elected officials, you know, Cosby spoke 50 years after Brown. Well, we're now, you know, more than that past the passage of the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act. We have more black elected officials in the country than ever before. You stop and look at corporate America. We have more corporate leadership than ever before. So you stop and you say, yes, we've had a black president. Unbelievable. So it's possible. It's possible. The question is, what is that leader allowed to say and retain the respect and the votes or the dollars of our own community? Because he or she is going to have to challenge some people who have an interest in the way things are, the status quo. And I recall that when Obama said something to the effect,
Yes, correct.
that black men need to pay attention to being good fathers.
There was a backlash.
I believe Jesse Jackson said he should be castrated.
Yes, and not such nice terms. That was much nicer than what he said.
Yeah.
Right. So he should be castrated for saying that black men should be better fathers. And Richard, I think you cited earlier the statistics on single women having babies in black America, and of course, on something like truancy and the absence of that father figure to say, go to school, what are you doing to yourself, right? So when you say, can we produce these leaders, I'm struck by Richard and Jordan. Here are educated, capable black men, right? One day in church, Reverend Watson said, everybody wants to take credit for Jordan. You remember?
I do.
Right, everybody wants to take credit for Jordan. But wait a second, where did Jordan come from? Why did this church benefit from his leadership at a critical moment? And is Jordan willing to serve on the vestry? Is Jordan willing to take the risk of standing for election in a city where people would say, oh gosh, you know, I don't know. Seems to me he's been acting white the whole time. Seems to me, I never see him, you know, in anything but a tie. And you know, he goes to church regularly. You know what I mean? Where do you see a black man in church? He goes to church regularly. What kind of brother is he? You can imagine.
Yes.
This is the kind of libel. It's a strong word, libel. But that's what you would be up against if you or Richard tried to become mayor of the District of Columbia. Are you black enough? And they're not talking about your skin color. It's your behavior and your belief system and your sense of striving for achievement. And somehow that's would be viewed as not in keeping. So I say that to say it's not just Richard and Jordan, but you stop and think about some of the most accomplished black people of this generation who say, I don't want to be a political leader. I'm not in the civil rights movement. I'm not a civil rights activist, they say. And you wonder, why is it that they choose not to stand up? They're doing well in their private lives. They're making money. They have good families. Why aren't they standing up? And the answer is they don't see that they would be welcomed, celebrated, and supported. Right. So they take the easy way out. Well, I'm being tough on them, but from my perspective, where I believe in uplift and generational progress, it comes at a cost.
Yes, it does come at a cost, but the thing about this is our traditional values of black families.
Right.
And we have a false narrative that, oh, he's acting this way, or because he's growing. That's the false narrative. We grow because, against that false narrative, we grow because of what we're trying to do for ourselves and reaching back, as you mentioned.
That's right.
And sometimes you want to reach back, but you also want to grow yourself. So it's two things happening at the same time, reaching back but growing, and only because you're growing doesn't mean you're not reaching back.
Correct.
And even if you're growing, you shouldn't be condemned and vilified because you're trying to grow.
Not at all. Look at the two of you. I mean, I think, again, we talked about this church, strength in this church, and the presence of black men as part of the community, as opposed to men who choose not to be part of a church community, and even as they see this church as a success, still stay away. To me, I don't get it.
Yeah. It's problematic throughout. I can use an anecdote again, personally. There are two, I would say, streams of consciousness in my wife's family and my family, where we view ourselves as successful. I'm third generation HBCU grad, view ourselves as the new mantle to lean back and pull up. And you have those who are so eager, who want to go to college, who every time they see you, they want to talk to you, and you carve that time out. You encourage them, you spend money on them, you say, I'll pay for your scholarship for this. That is how you do it. But then you also have ones that may have grown in the same household, the same environment, that anytime you give any advice on, I don't think this is right for your path, for your future, you're making a huge mistake, you're greeted with such hostility and such anger. And it comes a point, and I know me and my wife are dealing with this now, it comes a point where the question is asked, do we just give up? Do we throw our hands up and try to focus on our community like a Trinity, like where we are in Baltimore, and focus on those who want better for themselves? So I'm curious, just from your own wisdom, how you would give a young black man coming up some advice on that.
Well, two things to be said. One is, with your son, I think you're a role model. I mean, he's going to see what's going on. Now, earlier you mentioned that, sometimes, or maybe it was Richard who said, sometimes in black middle-class households, you see the kids do not have the drive or the sense of purpose.
That was from your book, yeah.
It comes from the parents, right? But I think modeling that behavior and setting a standard that is alive and right in your face is pretty powerful. Now, there are kids that will say, you know what, but I listen to the popular culture, I'm going to rebel against my parents, I'm going to rebel against the old people, and the popular culture is all about, getting high, getting laid, living the good life, talking the trash, all that. I think at some point you have to speak to people in very specific terms about how you can succeed. Here's what it's going to take. I'm not talking to you about social history. I'm not talking to you about political history. I'm talking to you about you. And I think you have to start the conversation in that way. It's a personal conversation so that not only am I here as a model for what is your potential, but that you could be far greater than me. And I'm just trying to help you see that of yourself that you are not appreciating yet. I believe in you, and I believe that you can be greater than anything we know. But here's the truth. You got to do the work. You got to knuckle down. And if you think that wearing, the latest fashion, depreciable commodity is going to make you more attractive and more of an achiever, you're wrong.
I know we wanted to invite someone from our audience here to ask a question, and if anyone wants to do that, there's a microphone over there, and so that you can prepare yourselves. But meanwhile, we could just continue with our questions.
Right. As you line up, we will be asking a few more questions. Juan, as a journalist, how do you assess the media's role in shaping our norms and expectations?
Again, you have to understand the media that we live with today. So much of it is social media. And the social media, to me, is a cesspool. My two granddaughters were here today, and they have a thing about cosmetics. These are beautiful girls. They have great skin. Why are you so locked into buying cosmetics? But it's because of social media. The social media influencers are pushing cosmetics. And so to be hip, you got to have this cosmetic and put on this lipstick. And I'm like, what is going on? But if you say that, then you're just an old, grumpy old man, right? You're just an old jerk. What are you, Okay, so let them have their fun. But that's the media around. Now, the second thing to say is, of course, we've talked about the music, right? But then imagine if you are watching Netflix, Prime, whatever, the streaming services, and again, look at the images. And I begin with the images that we're all familiar with in terms of black comics, black athletes, and of course, what you see in terms of some of the rom-coms, the Tyler Perry type stuff.
Oh, yes.
I don't see that we are elevating people to say, wow, that guy met a challenge and came out a champion.
Right.
I never see that in the media. So I'm talking social media, I'm talking popular media, and then in terms of the newspapers, I think so much of it is about the criminal behavior, right? Mm-hmm. I remember once writing a piece for the Post magazine about Raphael Edmonds. I don't know if you know that name.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Raphael Edmonds, the biggest drug dealer in Washington, D.C. for some time. And one of the ironies that I encountered in doing the story on Raphael Edmonds was how many people in our community viewed him as a success and a hero. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, Rayful Edmond was the biggest drug dealer in town. And he was a smart young man in terms of figuring out the better way to obtain the drugs and bring them into the city. But there's no way to get away from the fact that we went through a crack epidemic in this town. And Rayful Edmonds' fingerprints literally were all over it. And that people were dying and devastated and families crushed. But that was not the media version of the story. So to me, it's almost like we are swimming against a riptide in terms of the media image of who black people are at this moment in America. And to celebrate it and say, wow, I am proud to be a black American, people are like, well, you know, that's not quite right, you know, and this is that. And no, look in terms of the history, look at historical figures and how they have managed to, again, make a way out of no way, find a way. Those are the champions. Those are the people deserving of celebration and emulation.
And also, University of Pennsylvania has a course in their School of Business on how Rayful Edmonds' operation worked.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
I'm a child of integration. Integration started when I was going into the third grade. Oh, integration started when I was going into third grade. Before that time frame, I don't care who you live next to, neighborhoods took a vested interest in the children in those neighborhoods. If I did something and knew I was wrong, my neighbor was gonna call my mom, tell her, and it will be dealt with.
Right.
After you started integration, you started seeing things change. But what bothered me more than anything is I guess I was about 24, 25, my classmates, people I grew up with, I'm not raising my child like my parents raised me, and then the kid has no structure. That nucleus is gone, you don't have the folks, people were scared to say anything or whatever, but it was like, the more we were close, the older we got, I don't need anybody to tell me, this is my child, I'm gonna do it this way. And it has specifically hurt us as black Americans because there's no continuity there. And I just wanted to mention that. And I also, my parents were, when I say old school, my father would stop young men if they had their baseball caps on backwards. The first thing he would say, a man doesn't wear his cap backwards. He wears it forward. Which way are you headed?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that some of them would look at him like this, but when you saw them again, the hat was going forward.
It's delivering that message.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about the snitch society.
The snitch.
The snitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that doing to us as a community? We are afraid to tell the police or whoever it is that this person is selling drugs or this person is doing this in our neighborhood. And we have a culture that has developed, don't snitch.
I don't get it. Why are you celebrating and protecting people who are breaking down your community? Now, as a matter of an intellectual exercise, I can say, oh, this becomes the folk hero, that people see him in the Robin Hood tradition, that he is taking from the rich and giving to the poor. You know, Rayful Edmonds would give out sneakers around this time of year, Christmas time. Huge delivery trucks full of sneakers for the neighborhood and stuff like that. So people say, well, you're snitching on Rayful. But stop and think, is what I was describing before to Jordan, about the consequences.
Right.
You are basically making a drug dealer into the hero. And when you do this, you are celebrating not only the negative outcomes for abuse of drugs, but, you know, people were getting killed in order to enforce. You said they're teaching this at Penn?
Yeah, there's a course they have on
Yeah.
how effective he was, because he was so rich.
Yeah, he was effective. And I just want to make the point here, part of the effectiveness was certain people had to be killed. And if you weren't loyal, you were dead. And that's a huge cost of doing business in the drug business. They kill people, not only with the drugs.
I don't think that was part of
Yeah, exactly. They don't tell
They
that
don't
part.
tell that story.
the business model.
Yes, the business model was inventive.
They never saw drug dealers be incorporated.
Right.
Well,
That's what he did.
no, I think you see them incorporated, but what was different about Rayful, and I happen to know this, is that instead of, relying on the white drug dealers and the older drug dealers, I mean, if you saw The Godfather, some of this, some of it's Italian, but some of it was Irish, Jewish, all the rest, but it wasn't black. Right. But in D.C., what he did was he made for a black-run drug market because he figured out how to eliminate the middleman, the white middleman, and get the drugs himself.
And that's the problem. Really quick, to jump to what Richard said about the snitch culture, it's not just the glorification, you don't want to be a snitch, you're scared. Juan, in your book, you talk about the woman in Baltimore, and it's so depressing. Basically, a woman raising her children had a young man in front of her home who constantly sold drugs, and he retaliated. She still kept reporting him, and ultimately she lost her life, her and her children, because her house was burnt down by a black man.
Right.
Because a quote-unquote snitching, and no one in the neighborhood stepped up to say, we know exactly who did this, despite knowing who did it. So it's fear, it's consequences. Yes?
Hi, Mr. Williams. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm a sophomore pre-law minor political science major at Kent State University. I've been a member here for some time. I have a question. Well, there's several different areas, but one thing we definitely spoke a little bit about is our leaders, and it's going into a comment, into a question. But a lot of times, especially with the generation that I'm currently in, I'm Gen Z, or the younger generation, a huge issue that we have is credibility. In respect to that, we do have leaders of the civil rights who are currently in, their last of their years or have passed. Oftentimes, and this could be what is framed for our view, but a lot of times the issue is that there have been some mistakes made by some of our leaders where we don't find them credible or whatnot. I do have a question. How do we produce the next generation of leaders, or the incumbent generation of leaders, if certain people in certain positions of power aren't really doing certain things at a high level of competency?
Well, I think that you have to understand, as we were discussing earlier, that I think there are more. There's a larger black middle class, larger pool of educated black people, larger pool of, and I would, looking at you, Jess, I would say larger number of black women at a high point in American life than ever before. So when you talk about this leadership, you say, well, why wouldn't this huge pool, compared as a matter of historical comparison, produce more leaders? And again, I think that there is every incentive to say, I don't need that headache. I don't need to have all that. I can make more money doing something else, or I can, not deal with people complaining about me or putting me down in that way. The book that I wrote about, everybody in this church was so supportive of, came out in January, New Prize for These Eyes. It was a follow-up to Eyes on the Prize. And one of the lessons in there to me was, you can even have a successful black leader in terms of politics, Obama, and there's lots of black people who absolutely cursed his ass out on a regular basis, and especially younger black people who said, We got a black president, but we still have bad schools. We still see a large number of black men in jail. We still have, poverty rates that are disproportionate. What's good is this black president doing? And again, I think, wow, you would have to be sort of ahistorical to not understand the value of having a black president in the United States. But apparently a lot of people, and I will note that I believe it's in the Washington Post this morning, there's a story about a lot of the black and Latino men who voted for Trump now are coming back, having seen what the first year of Trump has delivered. And you stop and think about, I'm sorry? What? You don't want him back. Wow. I'm telling you, the wrath of God. Boy.
Right.
Holy smokes.
But a little reflection on history would have conveyed that message to them.
I think so. And I mean, what about the Latinos? Mm-hmm. He came down that famous escalator and said they were all rapists and thieves. Yeah. Why would you vote for that guy? Yeah. I don't get it. Except, he's got his name on the building. He says he's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of women. Yeah. Holy smokes.
I do have a follow-up, and since we're talking about the second Trump era, I just want to get your perspective. With all the policy and all the very harsh factions that are happening right now, do you think that the way that everything is going economically and politically wise, that this could also be an opportunity to rebuild the community as it pertains to economics? I know we talked about how, which I do agree in some of the sort, that integration was led to a portion, sort of our detriment as a community, that maybe we can use this opportunity to separate ourselves and build?
I think that, it's again, I think there are costs to change. Mm-hmm. Things change, and there's going to be some negatives and some positives. The whole effort has to be about accentuating the positives, right? And building then beyond the cost. And it's the same thing with investment. You put $10 into this church, and you say, is it going to pay off? Well, you got to work and believe in it and support it, and guess what? It will pay off. And if you look at the stock market, it pays off if you believe in it and stick with it. So I think that there is an opportunity there for growing that kind of leadership. It's just, you got to get people who are willing to support leaders, understand that I don't think there's anybody who's perfect, and we all need each other. I just find that sometimes people don't appreciate how much community matters. Mm-hmm. I sit here in this church matters.
Absolutely. Jessica,
thank you.
To your point about what can we do, or does it present an opportunity? I mean, look at Trinity. Look what we did during the shutdown. I never thought, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would Trinitarians come together and raise over $10,000 in less than 2 weeks to give to their fellow Trinitarians who were suffering because of Trump's policies. We look at what we did for the Thanksgiving drive, over 30 turkeys to families in need. That wasn't something we were doing under President Biden. I mean, we maybe didn't have to. But it presented, even in the negativity that we were dealing with, God allowed his people to be used. And that's, I think, what we have to do. We have to look inward as a community, be it at your school, as a young leader coming up in school, in church, at your jobs, wherever you are. You have to allow the voice of God to speak through you so that you can be used and called according to his purpose, which you already do. But I think that is a prime example of how we're reacting and where we can lean into building community and getting ourselves back on the right foot.
Yeah, see what you can do and do it.
Yeah.
Take advantage of your strengths.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Tracy.
Good afternoon, Trinity.
Hi, good afternoon.
So I grew up in the district in the late 70s. I'm going to age myself. During the Carter administration, where there's a recession, and then moved to an affluent area in Maryland doing Reaganomics. And my first job was my mother telling me, you're going to volunteer. And so, you know, growing up with the philosophy, the service to others is the rent you pay for your space on earth, Muhammad Ali, I'm wondering, where can we change the perception of leaders in our community and finding people who are passionate about giving back, whether it's, through a community of volunteerism, to bring up new leaders. So the perception is, volunteering is not just community service based on a sentence. It's more valuable in terms of giving back to your community. How do we change that perception to bring up more leaders and growing into more people with philanthropy, not strictly identifying the Mackenzie Scotts of the world who are giving billions of dollars to universities, but also celebrating other maybe smaller philanthropists and growing the community of leaders that needs to be identified?
Well, my answer is we've got to celebrate the people in our lives.
Yes.
And the people who are making the effort and people who stand up. And those examples that we just heard about that occurred right here in this church community, to me, I didn't know all the details, as Jordan told us, but that's inspiring stuff. That makes me proud to be part of this community, that this community responded effectively to need. But I don't know if the people know it, but I think that we got to advertise that kind of thing. We talked earlier about social media, the cesspool, the sewer. That messaging to make money for the big tech companies is going through 24/7, every minute. But the message about the good that's being done oftentimes is overlooked or even treated as old school, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I have a story in the book about a woman, I think she had a third-grade education. She washed clothes her whole life, and in her 80s had saved $150,000 and then gave it away for scholarships in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, they'd say, that's some stupid old woman. But I would say that's a hero.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm
Hi.
Deanna Williams, no relation, I don't think. My question is, since we dedicated a lot of time talking about young boys, young black boys, and having just recently seen an article about in DC Youth Services in terms of how many young men are incarcerated in the juvenile system, and listening to you, Mr. Wilson, I believe, talk about the interview that you heard with Mayor Bowser and the problem being truancy, I'd like to know if you know of an organization or know of a time where we can grab young boys, that sweet spot, before they cross that line into where truancy is sweet or where crime is appetizing to them, and you grab them at that point where we can massage them into the idea that education is cool, that you are still credible if you talk white, because yes, I was told I talk white as well, that you can embrace, you can be entertained, but that's not your path forward. And if there is a sweet spot, if there are organizations that we as leaders or not leaders can involve ourselves in to help usher that along for our young men.
Well, I think there are lots of organizations, some of them now are old school, things like Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, obviously. Yeah, but you know what, people don't join. I don't think that they're joining the same numbers, and now I think even Boy Scouts is not Boy Scouts, but Scouts, because
Right.
the girls have come in, and the girls are doing better than the boys, right? So, but you asked about organizations that would capture people at that age. And again, my wife is here. She likes to say that if you don't have impact in the first 5 to 7 years of a child's life, you're not going to have impact. You're not going to change that child. And so you want, I think, to make a message, to deliver a message, I should say, that begins very early. And part of that, inescapably is family. But then secondly, it's community-based organizations like Scouting, like the church that we are in, that they can see models of people who love each other and who act out of love and sacrifice for each other. To me, that'd be great. But it's an absence. I don't think there's any question about the power of your question, because it's so obvious. Like, well, how do you get into their heads before they buy into the toxic content that surrounds us the minute you turn on the TV or click on your computer?
One of the things is reading is fundamental of this program. And then Linear Street Elementary School, you go and talk to the principal, like a tutor when the black boys there who are in trouble. And so there's several who do it individually. Going to the freaking public school system, they make you have a teacher certificate and all that. But if you go to the individual school, then they often offer you an opportunity to come in and do something. You just have to get clearance, you know, that you're not a child abuser. But that's easy enough.
Your wife.
But the individual,
That's Juan's wife, everyone, just so you know, Delise.
well, I have to tell you, I was tutoring this young black boy, very bright, but was failing in reading. And he would come in to my tutoring session and slouch down in his chair like this. So I upset the other tutors in the room because I slammed on the desk and I said, sit your ass up. They understand that. So he sat up and I said, now you look at me in my face and you say hello. So we got all that straight. Very bright child. But it wasn't part of the culture for him to be so bright. And I told him how stupid that was and that he was going to end up in jail, and that was fine. But if he paid attention to me, he would be smart, graduate, and be important. Long story short, he was very smart. I found him books with black boys in it, sports, that he could read. He excelled in the classroom, no longer needed tutoring. And his mother came up to me in the grocery store. She said, thank you. He's now gone, to high school. He's in the honors program. I said, your son was smart. He just needed to know that being smart is good.
Yes.
That's right, that's right.
Wait a minute, I'll tell you. He was 9.
It's not easy.
Well, and I only took the bad boys. I didn't want slow boys.
I would just like to say that it's not easy, and it wasn't easy in the 1950s. Even though they had Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things like that, it wasn't easy. It never was easy. But you just have to push and find out where those opportunities are. And it's not easy, so we don't want to make it sound like it's that's easy to find where to get that 5-year-old, 6-year-old young man into a program. But you just have to continue to look. And I just want to make another point, if I may. We can't live with apathy in any way. And there were programs after Brown, and that's what we started with. Affirmative action came. And affirmative action was a remedial, was to get people whole again because of slavery. But then in the 1990s, you didn't hear about affirmative action as much, but you started to hear about diversity. And there was opportunities in diversity, but it may have melted for some situations, but it was a change. And right now, we are in an administration that wants to do away with equity, all that. This is not a time to be apathetic.
Right.
This is not a time to even think about, well, we want affirmative action again, or we want diversity again. We have to go and look at ourselves and take responsibility as to what our one life is going to be now.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right, amen.
Jessica, you have a question first?
I just wanted right where we were on it. When we talk about we had a black men problem. How do we make sure that we continue to uplift our black men, but we not without neglecting the base of our community, which is black women? Because when we are focusing on getting black women on track,
Well, I think black women are doing pretty good right now, but that's only in comparison to black men.
That's right.
So I would say that we need to continue to sustain the progress that black women have made over the last 20, 30 years. But again, what your question suggests to me is don't forget black women and don't forget the need, to give them attention in any way that you can. Did you have some?
I would say, and I usually get in trouble with my commentary on this piece. I think the idea that black women would be forgotten is a lie that the powers that be have told you all. I think if you bring black women and black men together, you will really become the community that you always were supposed to be. The idea that it's black woman versus black man for resources, not saying that's what you've insinuated, but that is where a lot of the talking points go. And I don't think that argument, women versus man, feminism versus masculinity that they're pushing nowadays is something that our community needs to take on. Black women have been the backbone of black America since slavery. It's not going to change. We have always needed black women. We will always need black women. But the argument that black boys need some special attention, it's not because black women have walked away from black men. It's because every other group in America has left black men behind. And it's no longer okay, in my opinion, for it to just be on black women. Black men need to step up to help black men. And while we're talking about that and trying to elevate it, it's not to say that black women will be forgotten. It's just that there needs to be some tender love given to black boys now so that we can balance that out, so that you can have that black nucleus that we so desperately need in this country right now, in my opinion.
Okay. Hello, all. I'm Jasmine Smith, in my second year at UDC, and I had two things that I kind of wanted to touch on. Something you spoke about earlier was about people, the importance of education, going to school and becoming successful, and how when you do those things, it's almost impossible, like the rates for poverty are really low or zero. And one thing I wanted to ask about was about the people who are successful like that, and that crab and a bucket mentality, and that close the door behind you kind of thing, where they come out of their situation and the things that we lack in our community, but then they don't pour it back into the youth. And everyone's always talking about the youth and how we need to do better and how we're the future of the world. But the people who are before us, like even with Kamala, like we show up to the basketball games, we fill out the stadiums, we pour our money into those kinds of things, but we don't pour our money into our communities. Kids are stealing shoes from shoe stores, but so it leads to people like Rayful Edmonds doing those kinds of things, and then you're idolizing the fast life and all of that. So how do we have people who are like Kamala, where she and Obama, where they were like the first in their sectors in politics, but they were being held to a standard so high by our own community when we're held so low by others, where people were judging them when they were like, oh, well, they're the first black this and that, they should have done this for us, but rather than celebrating that they were the first and that they were able to get their foot in the door. And so now we have like Kamala, she's just thrown her hat in the ring, and she said that she's done because of all of the judgment she got, which I don't think necessarily is a good thing on her end, because she got us there and she can continue to nurture us. But how do we keep that in our community, and like we use our economic power for ourselves rather than putting it into places where people don't care about us? We go to the Gucci store where they've made it clear that they don't like us, but we won't purchase school materials for our classrooms where we're lacking things.
Well, I think that was a commentary.
Right, right.
And I
and a lot
appreciated
to
it.
unpack.
I appreciated it, and I think that we need to hold to your standard. I think you got to, invest in your community. Well, I mean, this one of the things that I picked up in this whole conversation is you got to deliver personal messages about success. And part of personal success would be, you invest in yourself in terms of education and ambition, but you also invest in your family, you invest in your community, you invest in your business community. And, if around here, a black business community, I mean, you go over to Silver Spring and it's an immigrant Ethiopian business community, right? And you go up Georgia Avenue and it's a Caribbean more business. But yes, why wouldn't you support those businesses? But I took what you said to heart. I mean, I thought it was a wonderful commentary that by the way, I get a little bit of a sense of you're condemning people who don't do that, and I would too, but I just think it's less that you want to condemn them than encourage them to recognize.
I think that we can be multifaceted and we don't have to only be focused on things, but I feel like it's a little offensive. Like when I heard personally people complaining about the results of the election when either they didn't vote or they voted for Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I couldn't
Now
be
you're
more in
preaching.
your corner on that one.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head
It's crazy.
Yeah.
We were just talking about, the blacks and Latinos who voted for Trump. What is going on?
They think that by getting those kinds of people that they think are below them out of the country, that they'll suddenly be lifted up on some sort of pedestal and offered these jobs when they're not. And if you think that, I'm sorry, you're slow, and the other people around you are fast.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, thank you. That is commentary, right?
That's commentary.
Thank you.
There's a church down the road has on the sign outside that said, "Hate never made any country great."
Never.
And on a personal level, if you think hating on somebody is going to elevate you, you're wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deborah Owens, and want to shout out my fellow Bison. And my husband and my father went to Howard Law,
There you go.
and we met on a walk in the neighborhood. You probably don't remember it, but I love this format. But one of the things you've said 2 or 3 times now is that social media is a cesspool. And I think I want to challenge that a little bit, because we're talking about how do we message to the young people. Well, that's where the young people are. So I think you're missing a huge opportunity by slamming it. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff on social media, but there's a lot of great stuff on social media. You can find out about black businesses to support on social media who don't have the money to advertise in the more traditional ways. You can create movements in social media and grab young people early. And so I think when we're talking about messaging, it shouldn't just come from us. If you want to reach those people, let's ask the younger people how they get their information, how they get their messaging, and meet them where they are, instead of saying, social media is a cesspool. And I'm not condemning you, because we're in the same generation. I'm just saying that the future is digital, right? AI, and that we can use that as a powerful tool to get our messaging out.
Without a doubt. Now, I don't think there's any question that's where they're at, was your first point. That you got to understand that's where young people are getting their information. And there's good to that.
Yes.
In a sense, there's never been more ready access to news and information than there is today because of social media, because of the internet. And as you said, you can advertise black businesses that maybe couldn't have advertised elsewhere. You can organize, Black Lives Matter organized online. But then again, the reason I say a cesspool is you also see the backlash. You also organize Oath Keepers and Promise Keepers and Proud Boys and all that stuff. They organize online too. And so all the grievance and hatred also is there. But my point about the cesspool is I think a lot of the distraction for monetary purposes is there, that you might view it as entertainment. The reason they're there is they think it's fun. I'm not sure they're going there to study or to be informed at times. They're going there because it's distracting, and I think the algorithms get into your head, so you keep clicking, you keep going, and you keep going further and further into one rabbit hole or another, and it can be for many reasons. But to me, it's addictive and not helpful, but could be. I think that's your point, and we got to figure out how to make use of social media. I don't think there's any question.
I don't think we have to figure it out. The young people know how to do that.
Well, but they're doing it, I worry that they're doing it for distraction. It's not that they're tuning in, like Reverend Shayna will say, for the online, people watching online. And I say, I hope they're watching online. I'd love to know that they are watching online. Do I think young people are watching our church service online? No.
Do you know that for a fact?
No, I don't.
Okay, because you're sharing kind of your experience.
Yes.
But I think that a lot of young people are getting really impactful information online. The young lady here spoke about Kamala Harris. And again, I just want us to be open to all of the tools that we have
I agree with that.
available to us, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
not miss those opportunities, because the Oath Keepers are going to be here whether there's social media or not. The Klan's going to be there whether there's social media or not. But we have to be in those spaces
Yes.
as well. And we can have a prominent place in social media. So that was just my thought. It's a great opportunity for you to take your messaging and tap into some of these wonderful young people we have here and say, how do we put that together? And now with AI, you know, we don't have to spend 8 weeks. We can do that in 2 days, right? So I just want us to be open to all of the tools. The second thing that I wanted to get everybody's opinion on is, you know, my father is an attorney, civil rights leader, and all of that kind of stuff. But he did some of this, but one of the ways we sometimes argued a little bit is I'm like, but who are you grooming to replace you?
There you go.
Who are you grooming to replace you? So I think we talk a lot about young people, but the question is, who are we pouring into and grooming early and staying with them, staying the course with them? And I think you see, you know, we have these great leaders, but then they go and poof. There's nobody waiting in the sidelines, and I think this is how some of the other populations have been very effective. They have a deep bench. They start grooming people early. And I would also love to see us share more of our failures with the younger people so they know it's not a derailer, right? Because I spend a lot of work with people in corporate. Black people in corporate and we don't share our failures. We only show our successes. So by not showing our failures, when they hit a roadblock, they don't know that they can overcome it, because we're never talking about that kind of stuff. We're only talking about, you know, how much money, how much bonus. And so those are my thoughts, that how do we groom people to be in place and get them excited and really bring them into the fold? And yeah, I just like your thoughts or some ideas about how we can do that, because it does take place, but how we can do that even more.
Right. So as the younger one on the panel, I'll take it from a young perspective. I think you just have to give opportunity. I look at my story here at Trinity. If I I've been here for 10 years, and I'm the youngest senior warden that they've had, but they made room for my youth. They did not condemn my youth. They embraced it. And that's why I was able to lead them in a 2-year transition. I can think of any opportunity that I've ever had. It has been someone who took a liking to me that was older, that said, you know what, this guy has potential. He may be rough around the edges on this, or he may not get this quite yet, but I'm going to pour into him. I'm going to do that. I'll give you a real life story. A Howard Law grad, since you brought up Howard Law. I went to Howard undergrad. He was a judge in South Florida, Judge Rogers. I went to GW Law, and he called me to his sickbed, and he said, I'm going to write you a check for law school. And I, was like, well, I don't necessarily need the money, but I'm not going to tell him that. And so he said, I didn't give you this money because I thought you needed it. I gave it to you to remember that when you're an old man like me, that you did not get here by yourself. So what did I do? As soon as I had my first corporate big law job, I set up a scholarship at Howard to do the same thing. So those one-off opportunities are, at least in my life, is what have made a difference. When I think about my love for the arts, right? My wife and I love the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. I'm looking at some of our friends who came from Baltimore. Every time that the BSO has a gala, they invite us. They don't say, oh, well, Jordan and Naja don't have the money to sit at our table. They say, we're going to expose them to this so that when they are in our shoes, the arts can continue. Those are small individual situations. And yes, that's not like a major leader story, but it makes the difference. It makes the impact. And I think it's up to your generation and those who are older to make room for my generation, even if it is not what you would have done or what you did. It produces longevity for the idea that you're supporting.
Yeah, I think we have to embrace those ideas.
Right.
And not be like, that's not how we did it. But if we, in this generation, be more embracing and focusing on what's good, and just growing that piece and not focusing on the stuff that's not so good.
Right. Oh, Lady Jean, hello.
Hi. So just to piggyback off that a little bit, so in my professional career, I guess, most of my opportunities, for whatever reason, have been given to me by white men. I've had a lot of difficulty, for whatever reason, with black professionals or even white women. And I want to know, why is that I feel like white men maybe are more willing to use their political capital on people, whereas I have sensed, right, in my journey that black professionals are more, they're not as willing to, let another black person step into in a position of power, authority, I don't know what it is. So I would like your wisdom on that, and why do you think that is? Right. But if we are threats to each other and we're not helping each other advance, I guess the crabs in the barrel thing, how do we overcome?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know the personal story. I'm not sure it's typical.
Industries as
but
well.
I mean, when I look back in my life, I've had mentors, black and white, mostly black, but black and white. And I'm just not sure how to respond to your question, because it's intriguing. Maybe they don't feel threatened. The way you told the question was that other black people, especially black women, might see you as, well, you're going to breeze by me, and then, then I lose my opportunity. They think the pie is limited. That's the only thought I have. And the other thought that comes just listening to your question is where I'm getting this answer, is that you know how to speak to people in a way that connects with those men and with the women. They can see that you are connecting with them too, but they worry about, again, you as an effective communicator and maybe a smart person that would outpace them. I'm just curious about that. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I look at my own career, going through life. Sometimes you have encountered persons who may be a manager, black manager, and you may have less confidence in himself in order to bring others behind him. That's a natural situation, with black, white, whatever. And so it may be a level of confidence, but I think you overcome that through mentorships, by speaking out. And it's almost like if you were in undergraduate school, people say, well, go to your counselor. And it's up to you to go to your counselor, to talk to the counselor, talk to your professors after class, things like that. Some people do, and some people do not. So I think it's as a personal mission to try to mentor, to go to people, speak with people, as you mentioned, communicating the issue, because even a person that with less confidence in themselves could be overcome with communication.
I think we find that, I can speak from, and she knows this because she lives with me, but the big law, and looking at big law, you find that there are so few of us in the room that there is a fear that if I'm seen as the person advocating for black people, I'm going to be relegated to that. But you just have to say, F it, I'm going to do it. Anytime there is a black person that comes before me, and she knows this, whether I was on the hiring committee at my old firm, and they are seeking mentorship, I don't care how busy I am, I don't care how stressed I am, I don't care if I don't know the subject that they're asking. I will carve out time to speak to them, to talk to them, because I may be the only person that they feel comfortable with. But however, what I have found in the older generation in those same rooms is that they sometimes feel you have it way easier than I ever had it. So what are you complaining about, or what are you crying about or questioning about? And I have mentored older attorneys and younger attorneys, and the statement is, look, I'm rooting for everyone, but I'm really rooting for everyone black. And that's just what we all have to do in our individual capacities. That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm big on that.
Yes, we know.
Being the difference.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
From an HR perspective, read the room.
Yes.
You have to read the room. And you will be able, as you speak, usually in situations after you've done your interview and talk, somebody will call you to the side.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when they do that, that person's in your corner.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll just make an announcement. We are actually having great conversation online, so I do ask if you please use the microphone so that the people online can also hear, because they are
And we're going to
blowing
take
up
one
the
or two more
comments.
questions. We have to be mindful of Mr. Williams' time. I got the head nod from his wife.
Hello, hello. All right. I've been able to sit back and listen, and it's about black boys, black men, and I've always been that one. And you know what was hurtful growing up was my own community talking about my hair, my own community talking about who they desire, my own community not supporting me as a skateboarder, my own community for everything. So I made sure I was strong in my community because I knew who I was, because I had my mother and my father. But I also grew up in a community where a lot of people didn't have something that I had. And they always had different role models, like Michael Jordan or things like that. So I didn't like sports the same way that other people like sports. They like sports, they like averages, they like all that, and all that time to talk about somebody else as a role model was pretty irritating, frustrating, because I was a black man who did what was a well-rounded person, kind, nice, supportive, community-based, intelligent, but the women weren't desiring that. They desired some of that. You had to have the nice hair. You had to do things like that. So come on now, let's keep it real. So, baggy clothes. Hey, that's my fashion. I'm a skateboarder. You had to wear baggy clothes. Okay? So when I'm told that's a jail culture, no, it's not only. No, it's a different type of culture. It's a rebel culture. My hair, rebel culture. But who am I rebelling against? People try to make it seem like I rebel against white people or black people or who? No, I'm rebelling against inequality. I'm rebelling against lack of respect. That's what I've been rebelling against. So my whole life, I go into rooms where I'm not gonna wear the tie and still go into that room. Or I'm going to wear the tie and go into that room. But if I wear the tie, my hair doesn't match. Okay? I'm still the same person. So, I love it. I love going into rooms where you're lower level of respect, but the same intelligence. So I would challenge that when I went off to university. I would go into frat parties, I would go into hip-hop parties until I started running them. Okay? I started doing that. I took over the psychology club, became the treasurer. Okay? Started throwing parties, bringing people together. What I noticed was people were breaking down their beliefs, because now I'm putting hip hop, reggae, jungle, house, all in the same place, putting a wall divider where you could go to different sides of the party. People say they never saw that. But I keep doing stuff like that. I go to Japan. I spent 10 years as a teacher, not just a regular teacher. I went there, and I'm Moja Sensei. Moja means curly hair, Sensei. People were afraid of me, afraid. So I made this big map, and on this map, I colored the Caribbean islands, different colors. And I made it real vibrant on this white piece of paper. And I put it on the big chalkboard, and then I circled and said, I'm not the Pirate of the Caribbean, which they said I was. Because Jack Black, at the time I went, Pirate of the Caribbean was very big, very offensive. So I had an opportunity to do what I'm doing today and tell people how it is. You know, I have a son here who's Japanese, half black, half Japanese. I have a wife over there who's Japanese. You know who are the most respectful people to us? Black women. All around, black women. Who's the most disrespectful? I'll let her say that. But I started to throw parties in Japan, and when I started throwing the parties in Japan, people started to realize that, you know, Obama was president at the time. I had a lot of power in Japan because it was an opportunity to break down stereotypes. So again, back to my first day, I would draw a circle, draw here, it's one thing like this, that's called a lock. I'll draw another face, do a twist, that's called a twist. Do 3, that's called a braid. You get one chance, I'm going around this whole room, you can touch my hair one time, and then no more. But when you touch my hair, then you get to see, this is my culture. I walk down the aisles, I'm so disappointed in the fear that some have. But then I find the ones who had the most fear, and I'm gonna change them over the next 10 months. Yeah, you. And then I asked my school contract, I want every elementary school in the county. I want every elementary school. And that's what they did. I won Teacher of the Year 9 months later of 30 teachers. Because the impact, and the impact really doesn't come from talking to your same peers. Talk to the other people who don't know you. That's where I made the biggest impact with my skateboarding. Everybody was making fun of a skateboarder when I was young. And then I started to see Skateboard P, Pharrell, and all these other famous people become hip hop and they become the skateboarder face. Nah, it was me. I was in Virginia skateboarding, getting dissed by my community. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the thing is, all these hip hop artists, they're hiding secrets. The secret is they're traveling the world. They're getting on the plane. They're doing the biggest things because they're taking that sound from India. They're taking that sound from Japan, like a Missy Elliott. Each knee son. Super hit. She didn't say nothing but 1, 2, 3. Okay? And I saw how they were pimping each other. Hip-hop was pimping stuff, but we're pimping people, but yes, okay, I'm gonna get off the mic. But in order to really make change, go to where the void is. That's what I did, and that's how I lived my life. And I then started to write a story about it. And it deeply affects me because I can't write the story because it doesn't have a success at the end right now. It's like still in turmoil. I'm still writing where I'm stuck. I'm like, I did all this, and one thing that was said was very important, was this thing. When you're moving up, and then you don't want to leave people behind, then you gotta only our community has to turn around. Only our community has to turn around and then cap that person, hold your leg, and slow you way down while you're trying to reach this goal. You know your goal, but you say, if I reach this goal, I'm going to leave all those people, and I won't be able to live with myself. So I have to leave Japan. I'm teaching thousands and thousands of kids. I'm videotaping, I'm recording, I'm making big impact. But I can't be around my cousins, my niece, my nephew, my father, my mother. I can't be around them to make change. So I came back. You know, the hardest part of coming back was the adjusting of the miscommunication of what I'm doing. I'm holding a door, someone thinks I'm being rude, someone thinks I'm a thug. I'm like, wow. I came back. I know, it's on. So I came back, and then I did a performance at the Atlas Theater, 2017, March 3rd, and I was trying to tell the story. I was getting caught up trying to tell a story because I was like, it's not really that I got to tell a story. It's that we all got to do it. We all do this part. It's getting the void, you know? I think that was what you said in the front. You know, I love those students that hated me the most. Oh, that was the fun. Because those are the ones that changed and going to forever see that change and say, hey, you can't say that about black people around me. Nah, I guess Moja Sensei. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Well, that was a good way to end. It was. So I want to thank you all for coming out and joining our conversation. Thank you, Richard, for co-moderating. And thank you, Juan, for this prophetic book and spending this afternoon with your church family. And for those who enjoyed it, even that came out in the snow, we appreciate you. And for those online, thank you for tuning in. We will have more of these discussions in February for Black Heritage Month. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you. That's good for me. Keep me straight. Thank you.
Okay.